on hayes.ca/DNA. So thank you very much for joining us today. I believe we have over 200 people registered for today's session, and I hope you all find it very productive. So my name, as is mentioned, is Rowan O'Grady. I'm the president of Hayes in Canada, and I've been in the specialist recruitment business now, all with Hayes, for almost 20 years now. 8 of those have been based here in Toronto. The reason behind the idea, the DNA series, and we get asked this question, why did you decide to do this, was really just to understand with some certainty what does it actually take to reach the top of your profession in Canada. And as Canada's leading recruiter for the human resources area, we've got the means and we've got the expertise to be able to answer that. And it would appear from the interest that we've had in the project that there's a clear demand for the answers. So why not find out? I should also point out here that really the insights and findings that we have here that I'll share with you, they're relevant to anyone with ambitions to progress their management career in human resources. Whether that actually includes becoming the vice president or not doesn't really matter so much. So over the next 20 minutes, and I think we can stick to 20 minutes, I'm going to share with you a preview of the full report. We'll have a few minutes at the end to answer any questions that you may have, and you can type those into the chat box as we go along or save them till the end. The full report is out on September 10th, so that's tomorrow. And as I mentioned, you can go to hayes.ca/DNA to request a copy for yourself. So how do you find out what it takes to become a VP of HR in Canada? So what we did a number of different things. Number one, we surveyed 100 of Canada's leading VPs of human resources, obviously currently working in Canada. We surveyed them on their qualifications, their choices, their background, education, industry experience, the challenges that they've faced, and even the mistakes that they've made. We also did a deep dive analysis of 100 VP resumes to really get into the detail and into the nitty-gritty of their resume, but also to see how do they actually present themselves and what do they put on and what do they not. And we interviewed Canada's leading vice presidents of human resources to get their insight and advice and how they got to where they are today. And we've actually created a short video. The video is available on September 22nd so that you can hear from them directly yourself. The video includes interviews from HR leaders from IMAX, Loyalty One, Dream, and Cisco. So it's really well worth watching. And as I said, it's out on September 22nd. So just a little bit about the respondents as some context. The majority of the respondents were female, some 70% of the respondents, and most were aged between 40 and 60 years of age, as you would expect. Biggest influence on their career, they said that the direct manager seems to have the most impact, which is important to remember for your rising stars when you're building your own teams. And that's closely followed by a colleague or a mentor, and then a friend at 17% saying that was the biggest influence. Dad would appear to have more influence than mom. And from just the information here that you look at, there is obviously a clear gender imbalance in the industry, and most people, 64%, believe that to be true. So there you go. Okay, so we really set out to be able to define the path to success for an aspiring VP in human resources. Whilst we can't really say that there's just one single path to success, when we sat down to look at all of the results from the survey and the resume analysis, a couple of key themes kept coming through, and we asked ourselves this question. We said, what are the key abilities that a vice president must accumulate during his or her career to be given the best chance of success? And that's exactly what we have to share with you today. I think the most succinct way of describing the path to the VP role is HR experience first, then learn the business. Firstly, you must get a very broad range of practical experience, and I would stress that practical experience, and ensure that you can meet the everyday business needs of the organization. Secondly, you must develop your skills as a leader, and by this we mean a leader of people, obviously. And thirdly, your success is defined by your contribution as a strategic partner within the organization. Essentially, it's your ability to contribute towards the achievement of the goals of the organization. And over the next few minutes, I'm going to take you through each one of these points, one by one, and expand upon them. But before I do that, just a brief aside on the importance of soft skills development, because this came through quite clearly. We asked our VPs, what are the personal characteristics that a VP must have? And you can see the results here. So the most important characteristics are at the top of the pile. The most important are being proactive, strategic, responsible, and then ethical. So that's not overly surprising, but what we thought was interesting was that you can actually almost see this graphic as an illustration of the characteristics that you require as your career progresses in human resources. So at the bottom of the stack, or at the start of your career, you need to develop characteristics such as being detail-oriented, transactional, and enthusiastic. At the mid-range of your career, these start to change, and things such as being adaptive, credible, collaborative start coming into play. And then at the top, or the senior end of the career, obviously you've got the characteristics I've mentioned already of being proactive, strategic, responsible, plus the essential core value to the role of being ethical. And we thought, just as a practical tool, that graphic, or this graphic here, it could really help an individual understand the progression from one level to the next, and also to check to see if you've developed the characteristics for the level that you're at, and help with understanding the characteristics that you have to get to the next level. Okay, so as I just said, we have three elements of our progressions from the start of a career in HR to the VP level, and they are getting the right experience, becoming an effective leader, and finally, being seen as a strategic partner. So let's look at each individually. So we analysed 100 Canadian VP resumes. We looked at qualifications, designations, skills, experience, and even pastimes. We've documented the results in the full report. I've actually just posted a little shot there from the full report on the top right, so you can see how it looks. But for now, I've just pulled out a couple of key highlights for you. We looked at qualifications and professional designations, and almost 70% have a postgrad diploma, IRS, or certificate in HR. Around 45% have the CHRP, and then virtually 30% with a master's degree of some sort. Interestingly, 62% said that their undergraduate degree was unrelated to HR. We also asked our VPs which designations they saw as being imperative, and they could only select one, and the clear winner was the CHRP. 60% said that the CHRP was the imperative designation or qualification that they would require to see. We also looked at skills, experience, and achievements, and again, the full findings are in the report, but to highlight a couple of key points here. The vast majority have not progressed in a straight line within the same organisation or industry. Most have worked in multiple industries over the careers, although, interestingly, experience of working in different industries was not highlighted as a necessity by the VPs, unlike what we saw when we were looking at the CFO and the CIO analysis, where for those roles, working in different industries was seen as an absolute essential to progressing. What was far more important was actually the need to get experience in virtually every function within HR. So when you look at this slide, you can see that 100% of the VPs have experience in multiple HR functions, and the number one area that VPs started their career was as a generalist. And that adds up really with the career path, and in particular with the first step, and that is being able to meet the day-to-day needs of the business. But that doesn't only mean having the payroll, benefits, and policies in order. It also means that you really have to have the answer to virtually every question that the business has for you. So everything from, I've just had someone off from work with illness for a week, what do I do, to someone in accounting has just lodged a harassment claim against somebody else, what do I do about this, and so on, as all of you all know only too well, I'm sure. The HR function needs to have the answer, and to have the answer, you absolutely have to have the experience. We asked VPs to weight how much of their time was spent developing their technical skills versus soft skills as their career progressed, and you can see the results here. So at the beginning of their career, the focus was clearly on technical skills at almost 70% of their time, and then as they progress through their career, the confidence in their technical understanding increases, and hence less time is put into developing it. And then conversely, more and more time is spent developing the soft skills. So obviously there's a real importance to development of soft skills, particularly as a person progresses to a more senior level. An interesting point on this topic of soft versus technical skills. 50% of VPs said it was their experience over personality fit that got them their current role. And that might sound obvious, but we found that in other roles like the CIO or the VP of construction, it was actually personality fit that those people saw as being the deciding factor in getting their current role. And you would wonder, why would that be? Well, we discussed that internally, and it's only our personal view on it. We might be incorrect. But our thought was that because HR is responsible for dealing with some of the more emotive, sensitive, and potentially ultimately damaging situations for a company, the organization really needs to know that the person in charge of that function, i.e. the HR function, absolutely has the direct experience of dealing with those situations before, and that brings confidence as opposed to having somebody who maybe doesn't have exactly that experience but you feel is the right personality fit. It's an interesting point. Okay, on to the second phase of the path to becoming the VP, and that is becoming an effective leader. So we're going to look at three areas here. Number one, communication skills. Number two, managing high-performing teams. And then number three, implementing change. So we asked, what was the level of importance that VPs gave to different soft skills, the most important being at the top of this graphic. So leadership and communication skills really being the most important things. And I've got a quote on this topic from one of the VPs we interviewed. It's from Nancy Groom, and Nancy Groom is the VP of HR and Organizational Development at Egg Farmers of Canada. And she said, I'll give you the full quote here, she said, leadership is about relationship building. It's about having tough, awkward conversations with management and being able to diffuse difficult situations. Understanding and relating to people by being approachable is essential. And I think that really just sums it up perfectly. Obviously, the HR leader's role, it's the ultimate people job, and excellent communication skills must be a prerequisite of the job. The second component of becoming an effective leader is building and managing high-performing teams, and by this we mean the HR team. So empathy obviously plays a key role when anybody is motivating a team, and if you can understand the challenges that the members of your team are actually going through, then that allows you to be able to provide support and advice that's going to be able to engage and motivate the people on the team. So what are the challenges that the people in your team probably face? Well, if we look at the challenges that the VPs faced, we asked them this question, and 50% of our VPs said that they second-guessed their own career choices. And when asked why, they said things typically like there wasn't enough opportunity, they didn't feel like they were making an impact, or sometimes that even HR within the organization lacked credibility. And if these are the issues or challenges that are faced by the people who've made it to the top, my bet is they're the same issues and challenges facing today's up-and-coming individuals. So being able to provide support, being able to provide advice, it's a critical part of keeping those people motivated and engaged. And then on that topic, we asked VPs if they had had a mentor, and at what point did they have a mentor during their career. And as you can see here, as the graphic in the kind of middle of the screen, having a mentor is more prevalent at the earlier stages, which makes sense. But interestingly, it was actually at the first management level that the highest number of future VPs had a mentor. And that's an important thing to bear in mind when developing your own team. So being able to play that mentor role for your junior and middle managers is absolutely essential. If you are a junior or middle manager, you need to identify a suitable role model, hopefully your boss or someone else in the organization, but you need to identify a suitable role model or mentor that you can emulate. Just as a slight aside on the topic of building the team in the first place, we're getting asked more and more questions about recruitment through social media, or even questions about, you know, what should our digital recruitment strategy be? And recruitment online now is way more than just posting a job on the board, as we all know. You've got advertising mechanisms that are becoming more and more advanced. Job seekers don't really feel the need to go out and search for the job ads. The jobs are proactively coming to them through quite sophisticated and targeted promotion. And that's what Generation Y or younger people have almost come to expect, which means as an employer looking to recruit, we now believe that you have to be able to bring your jobs to them, which in a nutshell can happen through all of these three avenues, so social media, mobile, and online. And then, of course, making sure that all the elements of the plan complement each other, are consistent, and are working together. And when you put all that together, the comment that we hear is that technology is making a solid recruitment strategy even more difficult than it was before. It's a topic I could talk about for some time, but obviously that's not the topic we're talking about today, and we don't have the time, so we won't. Happy to discuss it if anybody's interested at a different time. The third and final component of becoming an effective leader is in implementing change. So we asked what types of change the VPs had managed during their career. Downsizing or restructuring is the most common, but it's obvious that managing change is a fundamental part of the HR professional role. 80% have managed growth, management change, process change, as well as restructuring. We also asked, and it's an interesting thing to bring this up here, we also asked, what is your biggest weakness? And the good news here is that the least common weakness is difficulty in adapting to change, which is good news, bearing in mind the amount of change that people are responsible for making happen. However, the most common weakness was actually procrastination, followed up by a tendency to focus on the small details. My thought on this was, for a professional function that's frequently responsible for implementing change in an organization, that weakness in particular, procrastination, could be quite a damaging one. And we talked about that here again internally in the office, and we think that potentially the source of that weakness could be at times a lack of confidence in HR's position in an organization. In other words, thinking, well, we know we need to make these changes, but how is the business actually going to react? Or simply, do we really have the backing of operations on this change we're about to make, for example? And I think that question leads us on to the third and the final key progression for a VP of HR, which is becoming a strategic partner. Okay, so just on this point, it's a good place to highlight this. We asked, what was the single most important aspect of the role of a VP of HR? So once you're actually in the role, what is the single most important aspect? And the big picture answer to this is simply being a strategic partner. The top three elements that were picked out were, number one, providing solutions to meet organizational goals, number two, business partnering, and then finally, strategic planning. Following on from those, you can almost group them together under effective leadership. You've got managing change, problem resolution, and communication. So again, we're kind of revolving around people management and leadership. And after that, then you've got more technical and day-to-day knowledge and skills. Again, if you're at the start of your career, then the message here is look at the importance of a sound practical background and understanding before you expect to be a business partner. And if you're at the mid-stage of your career, it shows the next steps that you've got to take and how you should be thinking. But it's really, it's very easy to say, be a strategic partner, but how do you actually make that happen? And how do you make it happen, especially when you think that, and I should have highlighted this earlier, the biggest hurdle facing the HR function, a lot of the hurdles facing the HR function are frequently related to or linked to possibly a lack of engagement from the business with the HR function. So how do you actually make this happen? From our analysis and our opinion, we see there being three clear steps to becoming a strategic partner for the organization. And step one is to do with fostering relationships. The enemy of a successful implementation of a new idea or a change is really a lack of understanding of the obstacles that the idea will actually face. So far too frequently, ideas are implemented, or at least attempted to be implemented, and the business rejects them. The HR leader has got to take the time to develop relationships with the operational leaders. That will then facilitate, more open communication of problems and the obstacles before it's too late. If you know the managers well, if you have a good relationship with the managers, they're going to share with you what they really think about something. Step two, think about what the goals of the organization are, and think about what the problems the organization faces, but not in the context of HR. Where's the pain in the company? Where are they suffering in the organization? And if you know that, then think about how HR can actually alleviate that pain and help achieve the goals of the company. Remember, it's the goals of the company you need to think about as opposed to the goals of the HR department. And then finally, step 3 is taking that onto another level where you need to start to think about the long-term or the strategic goals of the business as opposed to the tactics. Again, not in the context of HR, but in the context of the larger organization. And then try and think about how can HR proactively get the organization closer to actually achieving those strategies. But this point is really more than just that. It's about transcending the HR department and asking yourself, are you contributing to the strategic plan? Do you have a view on how to improve the business? And I think if you are contributing and you do have a view and you're communicating that, then you are almost by definition a true partner of the organization. Okay, so that's everything on the preview of the report. I'm pretty sure that we're on time, I think 22 minutes. I'll finish just with a very short summary and a couple of recommendations from our point of view. So our key findings can be summarized quite simply as these 3 points. Number 1, having a broad range of practical, and that's the stress, practical HR experience and actually understanding the business that you're working for is a key starting point. Number 2, you have to become a leader in your own right, and that requires excellent communication skills, the ability to build and manage high-performing teams, and finally, being an expert of managing change. And then last but not least, clearly not least, you might have to actually pave your own path. In other words, you need to take the initiative. You need to build those relationships internally, listen to what the problems are, and figure out what are the answers. I'll just finish with a couple of recommendations for any budding or ambitious people who would like to be the VP of HR, or really anyone looking to progress their career or the management career in HR, and it's quite simple. Number 1, be open to new and diverse opportunities. You've got to build as much and as broad a practical experience as possible. You need to basically have the answer to every question that you're going to get asked. And that's a tall order, but that's the expectation. Secondly, identify a leader that you admire and basically do what they do and try and develop a relationship where you can get advice. And then finally, you've got to start thinking big picture. You really have to link the strategy of the business to the people, and then most importantly, contribute towards the strategy of the business. So that's the end of the key messages that we wanted to share today. So thank you very much for dialing in and listening. I hope you found it useful and that you got at least 1 or 2 constructive thoughts or ideas from it. We've got a few minutes to spare now to answer any questions that you have. So if you do have a question, just type it into the chat box, and then we'll do our best to answer it. Usually it's just a case of getting the first couple of questions and then it gets going. We've also got, so I can answer whatever questions I can. We've also got Rachel Finnan, who leads our HR business in Canada, and she's here telling me with questions that I'm not able to answer. And we've also got Taya Watson. Taya is our marketing director, who's responsible for the research and the analysis on this particular project. So as we're waiting for questions, just to request a copy of the full report, please go to hayes.ca/DNA. And as I said at the start, the full report will be released on Wednesday this week, and the video of the interviews with the HR leaders will be available on September 22nd. And also, because this is usually the first question, how do we get the slides? We'll have a recording of this webinar available on our YouTube channel immediately after the webinar, so you can not only look at the slides, but you can opt to listen to the commentary, or you can turn the commentary off and just watch the slides, so we can see what questions we have. So let's see. Right. Okay. We have one question. So question is, see if I can answer this. So the question is, based on the findings, is it essential that I have credentials in change management or just experience? Okay, based on the findings, is it essential that I have credentials in change management or just experience? So the first thing I would say is change management seems to be a whole area on its own or in its own right within HR, where you've got change management experts who I'm sure have got credentials within that area. But at the same time, from what we've seen, if you were going to go with one or the other, the experience is the most important thing. I think for a business partner, I know if I was implementing a change in my organization and I was talking to the HR department, what I'd like is for somebody to say, well, I have experience, we tried to do something like this before and here's what's happened. So I think a qualification or a recognition or something would be a great thing, but I think experience seems to trump everything almost in every category. So I don't know, Rachel, if you'd have anything to add to that about change management?
Yeah, actually we we had a big push on change management this past year. We really found that companies were employing people solely to do change management, whereas before it had been just part of other people's jobs. You can do a project management certification. That's usually a good inroad to have, but as you said, experience is more valuable. I do think that it is going to become more detailed. The education piece is going to be more requested. You can get a ProC qualification as well around change, but so many of our businesses are going through substantial transformational change that I think to actually become a senior leader in HR, that is the area that you're going to have to get yourself involved in as much as humanly possible.
Yeah, it's almost like, you know, you've the essential services that the HR department provides to the company just functioning normally, but it's almost that everything outside of that is you could classify as change management, because it's always people are the biggest obstacle when it comes to changing something in organizations. So yeah,
and I learned quite a lot this past year from it as well. I always thought that change was more, you know, just making sure that people were communicated to and everybody understood the end game for the change and be collaborative with the ideas so that you were getting input from people. And of course that is a big part of change, getting the buy-in from people. But I didn't necessarily realize until relatively recently that there's a defined plan around that as well, and it is actually quite technical around the project plan to make sure that it runs smoothly and efficiently, and that you do have minimal fallout, because I think retention of staff and retention of knowledge is vitally important to any of these changes, and the last thing you want to do is have people exit the business that puts you back when you're trying to move forward.
Okay, excellent. All right, there's another question here. So here's the question: what is your view on the CHRP designation, and is it needed today? Well, I know for a fact that we said at the start, 60% of the VPs who were surveyed said that they believe that the CHRP is absolutely essential, like it's a required designation. It was, I think, 46%, almost 50% of the VPs actually had it. So it would appear that for a VP, it isn't essential that you absolutely have to have it, but I would suggest that perhaps the people who are VPs currently started their career, 10, 15, 20 years ago. I would say if you have aspirations to become a VP today, it probably is essential. I think it would almost be noteworthy by its absence if you didn't have it. So yeah, I would say it absolutely is needed, and it's very well regarded and very well respected. So why would you not invest? Why would you not get that? Okay. Another question. What was the most common? Did you ask about the VP HR previous role? Okay. So I think the question is, what was the most common role prior to the VP role? Was it always director of HR? Thea, can you answer that?
Sure. So yes, you are correct. About 46% were a director before they were a VP role, but obviously that's under half. Significantly, nearly 30% were a manager before they hit VP. And then also just of note, about 10% were a VP before their current VP role. So if you are a director or manager vying for a VP role, you are going against some people that have held a VP role as well.
Okay. Actually, just kind of on that topic, there was a fair proportion of people who had to take a step, I suppose, a step down in size of organization, but a step up in level of responsibility. That seemed to be a common move to become the VP, that they would go to a smaller organization with a higher degree of responsibility than perhaps the company that they were in. Seemed to be, can you remember what that was, say, like the proportion or percentage of people who did that?
Sorry, Rowan, I was answering some questions there.
We were saying, you said there was a fair proportion of people who left the company that they're in to get a VP role, but typically at a smaller organization where there was a higher degree of responsibility.
Oh, it was a significant number. It was over 50% that did that. And they did that when they were at a management or director level.
50%. Okay, so a lot. Question, to what level would a human resources management certificate and recruitment certificate contribute to becoming a VP in human resources? And what experience would be considered more important? Well, I think from what we've seen on it and what we've discussed, the experience is more important than having a certificate in virtually anything. The experience trumps everything. And I think the specific experience that is considered more important, and this is a tough answer, you have to have a generalist experience. I think having 100% of the number one starting point for the VPs was start out as a HR generalist. It doesn't mean the 100% were, I should just correct myself there. The broad range of experience is what's required, and I think it is because that HR department needs to have the answer. You know, you don't want to go to your HR department with a question and the answer is, well, I haven't done that before, I'll find out. That can be frustrating. So I think the most important experience is a broad range of all of the aspects of HR. Another question, I'm wondering if any discussions were about the organisation where they become the VP of HR. Were they an internal candidate promoted, or did they move to the organisation to become a VP? I am not sure of that answer. Taya?
Sure. So actually, and I'm not just saying this, I promise, the number one reason or method in which they got their VP role was actually through a recruiter. In terms of internal promotion, that was the third most common, which worked out to be about 27% were actually promoted internally. But as we said, a lot of people left their current organization to get their VP role.
Okay. I do not see, hang on a sec, I just want to see, is there another question? Were many of the individuals interviewed coming from a non-HR background? Okay, well, that's a good point. So I remember it was 65% of candidates said that their undergraduate degree was not connected to HR, but how many people that ended up as a VP of HR started their career outside of HR? Do we know the answer to that, Taya?
I'll have to look into the report off the hand. I'm not sure, but it is in the actual report. Okay,
right. Well, so we don't have to wait until tomorrow to check that.
What
was the average number of years of experience prior to taking on a VP role?
That was, everybody averaged out between 10 and 15 years, which was the most common. There's a significant portion that were in the 15 to 20-year mark. In the report, there's a chart that lays out the exact year breakout by level before they achieved the VP level.
Right, okay. Okay. I think that is probably enough time. Everybody's busy. So thank you very much again for joining us today. And especially thank you to everybody who's contributed to this piece of work, not just in Hayes, but obviously all of the people that we interviewed and surveyed, who completed the survey for us. And if you have any questions for us, or if we can be of assistance in any way at all, please just contact me directly. You can see my email address on the screen. It's rowan.o'grady@hayes.com. And just get in touch. So thank you very much for dialing in today. I hope you found it useful.